Hi, boys and girls. It's Miss Kelly, and we are back. And today we are up to Unit 2, Week 1, Day 6. And we have been reading in our Unit 2 booklet excerpts from the book As Brave as You by Jason Reynolds. So today you're going to need your Unit 2 booklet. You're also going to need a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen that we're going to just use for jotting down some notes. Okay, our learning goals for today, we're going to continue to build stamina for independent reading. You've been doing a great job with that. We're going to write an explanation of a connection that we made during reading. We're going to monitor our comprehension while reading. We're going to analyze the concluding statement of an opinion essay. And we're going to write a concluding statement that restates but does not repeat the opinion and reasons. Okay? So let's get started. Okay, the first thing we're going to be doing today is we're going to be reading the next excerpt from our book. So you're going to need your Unit 2 booklet, and we are going to be reading on pages 6 and 7. Okay, it looks like this. It says Grandpop's Surprise. Okay, and this is our first time reading this excerpt from the text. So this little excerpt or this chapter is called Grandpop's Surprise, and the book that this is from is called As Brave as You by Jason Reynolds. Okay, so remember when back in probably the beginning of the year when we were doing review and routines, we talked about making different kinds of connections to text. There was text-to-text connections, text to self, text to world, text to media. So while we're reading, our brains are always making connections, okay? And some of those connections may be, we may connect one text to another text. We may read something and say, you know what, that reminds me of another book that I read before or a story that I read before. It may be a character that reminds you of a character in another story that you've read. We make connections to our own prior knowledge. So maybe we're reading about a topic that we know something about or we've had experience with in our own lives. And our personal experiences might be our feelings, things that have happened to us. Maybe something happens to a character in the story and we think, oh, I know how that person feels because that happened to me and that was how I felt. So as we're reading, we are always making those connections whether or not we realize it. So as we read the story, I'm going to think about how I can make connections between what I read in this excerpt and selection and my personal experiences or what I know about the world, okay? I can also think about what I've read in other selections or texts, okay? Maybe another story, another book. And these connections make the story more meaningful to me. They help me to better understand the characters and the plot of the story. So I'm going to show you as I read how I make a connection, and then you're going to have a chance to do the same. Okay, so if you have your booklet, okay, we are here and we are on page 6, okay? And I'm going to start reading from Grandpop's Surprise by Jason Reynolds. In this excerpt from chapter 2, Jeannie has just learned that his grandfather is blind, and he demands to know why his parents and his brother Ernie chose not to share this rather important information sooner. And then it says, number 441, what made Grandpop blind? Remember, Jeannie has the book where he keeps all the facts and the questions, and he kind of keeps that little booklet. Why you ain't tell me he couldn't see? Jeannie asked as his mother zipped closed the little pouch she kept her toothpaste, toothbrush, and lotion in. He had taken the red truck off the old blue dresser and was sitting on the floor, running his thumb over the wheels. Next to him, of course, was his handy notebook. He had lots of questions, but the most important one he had just asked. Why you ain't tell me he couldn't see? And that was a question that needed to be asked out loud. Your grandpop is a tricky man, baby, Mom began to explain. But then she got hung up and didn't seem to know what else to say. So she looked at Dad. Senior? She groused, snapping Dad out of his trance. Senior was what she called him, because his name was Ernie too. And she wanted to make sure that whichever Ernie she was yelling at any given moment would know she was yelling at him and not the other. Yeah, what's up? Ma cocked her head to the side. Would you explain to our youngest son here why we didn't tell him about Grandpop? Dad looked at Jeannie and sighed. Well, he's kind of a wild guy, Jeannie. Not wild, Jeannie, Ma interrupted. Just, interesting. Now, one thing I want to point out, if you look on page 6, down there in the second paragraph, there's a little where it says senior, she groused, and there's a little teeny tiny number 1 next to the word groused, okay? If you look all the way at the bottom of the page, there's a little teeny number 1, and it says groused, grumbled in a complaining tone. So that might be a word, the word groused. We don't hear that word very often, that maybe we don't know what it means. So what they did was they gave you what's called a footnote. They put a little number 1, and then you could go down here to the little number 1 and read what that word means. Now, if they didn't do that, if they didn't give us the meaning of the word, we know that we could use context clues. Senior, she groused, snapping Dad out of his trance. So it kind of means like she said it in a tone that kind of got his attention. So I would use my context clues there, but they did give us the definition of the word at the bottom of the page. Okay, so as I was reading this part of the story, okay, I was a little surprised to find out that Grandpop kept his blindness a secret. It sounds like maybe he wanted to be the one to tell people himself, okay? But I understand why Jeannie was upset, because that's his grandfather. That's his grandpop. And he probably felt like his parents kept a secret from him, that maybe they kept this information from him. And it reminded me of a time when when I was a little girl, my parents kept a secret from me about a trip they were going to take. And they didn't tell me until the last minute, because they knew when my parents would go out, I would get upset, I would cry, I would miss them a lot. So they kept that secret from me because they did not want me to get upset. So they didn't tell me until the very last minute. They didn't want me to worry. Okay. But I didn't like that they kept that secret from me. I remember being angry. I remember being sad and upset. So I'm going to make a note about this connection in the margin. I'm going to, out here in the line, I'm going to note my own experience, right? When my parents didn't tell me about a trip. They were going to take. So I wrote my note right there in the margin to kind of remind myself of the connection that I made there. And that was my own personal experience, okay? I remember feeling angry and upset and scared and sad, that this was sort of a surprise to me. So I did make that personal connection there while I was reading this page about Jeannie finding out that his grandfather was blind and that his parents had kept this from him. Now, as I think about the grandfather who is blind, we learn here that he's blind. It also reminded me of an article that I had read. Okay, an article that was in a teaching magazine about how blind students cope in school. Okay, children that are blind, that cannot see, that are vision impaired, and how they have to navigate and get around and be able to learn in different ways. And those students, in the article, they talked about how they wanted to be independent. They wanted to be able to do things on their own and not have to rely on the grown-ups and other people helping them all the time. So, there's different ways that that students who are blind are able to be independent now. A lot of it is technology, and they're able to do things on their own that maybe, a few years ago they couldn't. So while I was reading the text, I also thought about that article and those students wanting to be independent. And it made me think about the grandpop, and maybe he wanted to be independent too. He didn't want people to help him. So he might have wanted to keep that a secret because he didn't want people doing things for him. He wanted to do it himself. So again, I'm going to just make a note in the margin here. I'm just going to write article about students who are blind wanting to be independent. So that's another connection that I made to the text. I made one that was a personal experience, right? My parents kept that secret from me that they were going on a trip. And then this one about another article that I had read, another text that I had read about students who are blind. So I made two connections just to this one section of the text. Okay, now it's your turn. So you're going to read page 7. Okay, you're going to read page 7 and think about what connections you can make to your own experiences, your prior knowledge, other texts. And if you make a connection, write it out here in the margin, just like I did. Okay, so you can stop or pause the video here, read page 7, write any connections you might have over here in the margin, and I will see you when you get back. Okay, were you able to make any connections to the text? And if so, what were they? So think about this part of the text, right? Was there anything in there that reminded you of another story, another book, maybe prior knowledge, your own personal experiences, right? So that's why as we're reading, it's really important that we're always making those connections. It helps us to understand it a little bit better and make it more meaningful to us. When I read the text, when I was reading this page, Genie's connection with his uncle Wood, reminded me of my connection with my Aunt Lorraine. And it's my dad's sister, and we have a lot in common. People say we look alike, we act alike. And when I was reading, they were talking about how Genie has things in common with his uncle. And it sounds like he didn't really know his uncle, but they're telling him, you remind us of him. You have a lot in common with him. And that kind of reminded me of my connection with my aunt. Even though I know my aunt very well, we're very close, that sort of aunt and niece, an uncle and nephew connection was something that I made through my own personal experiences. And maybe there's somebody who's special in your family. It could be an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, grandparent that you have a special connection with. And maybe that is something that this reminded you of. Okay, so your first assignment is you're going to be continuing to read this excerpt from the text, and you're going to read on page 8 in your booklet, and it's also there on the Google Doc. You're going to read page 8. And then you're going to write about a connection that you made to the text down in the box. So you're going to read page 8. You can either read it in your booklet and maybe make some notes out in the margin and then type it in the Google Doc, or you can read it from the Google Doc and type it right into the box there. So for your first assignment, you're going to stop the video, go to assignment number 1, which is called Make Connections. Think about what connections can you make to this part of the text. Maybe another book you read, another story you read, character in another story, maybe your own personal experiences or prior knowledge, maybe your own personal feelings, okay? So you're going to stop the video here, go complete assignment number 1, and I will be here when you get back. Okay, moving on, we're going to go back to that opinion essay that we've been working on. Remember that there was an opinion essay about the book Lad, a Dog, right, which was from 1919. It was over 100 years old, okay? So when we're writing an opinion essay, and remember, opinion is our own feelings, our own thoughts. It's not right or wrong, but we usually have evidence or reasons to back up our opinion. And part of our opinion essay is a concluding statement, right? A concluding statement that kind of wraps it all up. And that's the last thing that your audience, the reader, will read. So it needs to be strong and powerful to send a message to the reader about how you feel about that particular topic, what your opinion is. So we're going to take a closer look up at the concluding statement for this essay. So during last week, we explored parts of an opinion essay. Okay, we looked at the introduction, we looked at the support, the excerpts from the text, the quotes, the words. And today, we're going to zoom in on that concluding paragraph and especially the concluding statement, the final sentence in your essay. So let's take a look at the concluding statement, okay, the concluding paragraph of this essay. In conclusion, I would not recommend this book or this author. The leisurely way Terhune tells the story and the old-fashioned vocabulary he uses will not engage readers today, nor will they get a great sense of the main character, especially since the story is told in the third person. My final opinion is that my classmates could pass on Lad. So that's the concluding paragraph. So in this essay, the writer concluded the essay by reminding readers of the opinion and the reasons for that opinion. And we don't want to just repeat what's already been said exactly the same way. We want to kind of restate it in a different way, and we want to make it memorable or strong because it's the last thing the audience is going to read. So that's why at the end, the phrase, my classmates could pass on Lad, is included. It's kind of a strong way of saying, like, yeah, they're not going to want to read this, right? So let's take a look at maybe another way that we could write this concluding statement. So how else could we write this? So when you're looking at the concluding statement, you have to remember that you want to restate the opinion. You want to kind of give the same reasons, but in a different way. And it helps to use powerful or thought-provoking language because it's the last impression that the audience is going to get, okay? So I want you to take a minute and see if you can rewrite on your piece of paper that you have, see if you can rewrite this concluding statement. Okay, let's look at it one more time. My final opinion is that my classmates could pass on Lad. What is another way that you could say that? What is another way that you could convey the same opinion, convey the same information, but maybe in a different, stronger way? So take a moment, you can pause the video, you can look at the sentence, see if you can rewrite that sentence in a different way, in a more powerful way. And you can pause the video and I will be here when you get back. Okay, so let's see what we did with that. So our concluding statement, okay, remember it has to leave the audience with a clear message, a clear idea of how we felt about the topic. Okay, so what was your concluding statement? How did you reword that? How did you make it even a little better than what we had previously? Here's an example of a way that you could rewrite that concluding statement to make it even more powerful. In conclusion, in my opinion, Lad a Dog is a book best left on the shelf, as there are far better and more modern books written about dogs that today's kids would enjoy much more than this outdated novel. So do you see how I'm saying the same thing, but in a different way? And I'm kind of making it a little bit stronger, like leave the book on the shelf, right? You can almost picture it like, I'm going to leave it up there, right? And saying that there are other books about dogs that today's readers, today's kids today would like way better than this old-fashioned, outdated book, right? So I said the same thing, but I said it in a different way, and I made it a little bit stronger and a little bit more powerful to leave the audience with that kind of takeaway opinion. So now your next assignment is that you're going to read a sample conclusion paragraph about another topic, not about the same thing, but about a different opinion essay. And then you're going to rewrite the concluding statement, the last sentence. You're going to rewrite that in your own words. Remember, you're restating the opinion, but you're saying it in a stronger way to leave the reader with that, oh, I get it. That's a really powerful way to say it. So you're going to, in your assignment number 2 is called concluding statement. And you're going to read the sample paragraph that's there on the Google Doc. Then you're going to look at the concluding statement and you're going to rewrite that in your own words down here in the box. How can you make that more powerful? How can you make that something that the reader is going to walk away saying, oh, I really know how they felt about that? Okay, so you can pause or stop the video here, go to assignment number 2, concluding statement, read the paragraph, and then rewrite that concluding statement in your own words, making it even more powerful. Okay, now we're up to my favorite part, which is independent reading, and you guys have been doing such a great job with this. I love hearing about all of the books that you're reading. So just a reminder, you're going to choose a spot where you won't get distracted. Start your reading right away. Keep your eyes on the page. Stay in one spot. Don't move all over the house, right? Read the whole time. Read silently. And most importantly, think about the book. Make those connections. That's what reading is all about. Now, there are some timers that you can choose from here. So depending on how much time you have, you can start one of the timers, okay? And then when the timer goes off, you're done, okay? Thank you, boys and girls. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.